let's get it started with our introduction to our very special guest today. Our special guest is Los Angeles-based audiobook narrator whose voice work draws on 3 decades of experience in law enforcement and the U.S. military. As the narrator of the Project Land Goes to the Movies audiobook, he brings the characters and stories of Project Land to life with range, depth, and personality. He's the voice that does the voices. Welcome to the Project Land stage, Eric Priestman. Hey,
hello,
Eric.
hello,
Eric.
Hey,
So
guys.
you're in your studio in LA right now?
I am.
All right, awesome. Well, we're going to ask everybody who's joining us to please share where in the world they are, since we just shared where they are. We love seeing that. And I can, turn my comments on so we can see who is here today as they come on up. So let us know where you are today. We got Philly, LA, and the Florida Keys in the house. So we got quite a bit of the US covered, but we'd love to know where you are. So Eric.
Yes.
I have a couple questions for you.
And I have a couple answers.
Oh, good. So you spent years in law enforcement before becoming an audiobook narrator. It's a big career change.
A little different.
What made you decide to become a narrator?
So the last 5 or 6 years of my career, I worked in the office. I was the front desk officer that's the guy you come see to get a ticket signed off or get your car out of impound or any kind of questions like that. You walk in our office, I'm the guy you talk to. And over the course of those few years, I got 2, 3, 4 different times of, hey, you've got a great voice. Have you ever considered, have you ever, that kind of thing, literally just randomness. And, it stuck in the back of my mind. It just germinated there for a while. And then when it got time for me to get close to retirement, I literally Googled, how do you become an audiobook narrator?
Wow.
And Google gave me answers and I went, oh, okay. And I followed that path. And that was 5.5 years ago. And here we are.
No kidding.
6.5 years ago.
I love how through the power of feedback, you found your voice.
I love doing it. I hate to say it this way, but let's be honest. I love the sound of my own voice. I like being in here. I like hearing myself tell stories. I do. The crux of it is I have to get other people to like hearing the sound of my voice. That's the thing. I can't pay myself. I need other people to pay me to talk.
Well, Jerry can speak to this too. I mean, we put the audition out for the Project Land Goes to the Movies voice. We had no idea who was going to come back. We have a bunch of people from around the world that are our authors, as you know. So we weren't sure if a Brit was going to get the gig or an American or, who knows where, right? And we were totally open. We didn't know if it would be a male or a female. We were just totally open to
threw it out there, right?
Right. What is going to happen here? So it was amazing. And we had 27 auditions. And immediately when Jerry and I listened to you, we were like, that's it. We have our guy.
Great.
So, and part of the reason is because we know that this book is unique. Of course, we're very biased that we love the book and what all the authors contributed to it. But one of the things that makes it unique is it's unusual. It's a nonfiction, and it includes stories and movie dialogue and more than 20 different author voices, males, females. We have a mother-son team. There's a lot going on there. So we knew we needed a pro to really bring it to life. Did that make the narration experience more fun or more challenging? All of that.
For me, that was more fun. I remember when I auditioned, I think in my opening email to you guys, I said something along the lines of all the movies, how many movies are in there? 20 different movies?
22.
Like yeah. I said something to the effect of the 22 movies in here, I've seen 18 of them. Because I had seen almost all the movies. There was only a couple I had never seen. The Italian one, obviously, I'd never seen The Great Escape. I know, shame on me, but right. But and for me personally, I just got lucky. I communicate in movie quotes. I know movie quotes out the wazoo. That's just me. So when I got to audition for that, it was a blast. I think the audition script was the chapter with Ghostbusters in it.
Yes.
And it was just like, oh, I know this scene intimately. I've seen the movie 1 trillion times.
Yeah.
So that was like, oh, this is my niche.
Yeah, that was the thing. We specifically chose that part of the script because it was part of there was lesson in there, but then there was movie dialogue, and it wasn't just one. It was Gozer the Gozerian. It was, a couple of the guys and who were the Ghostbusters, and we were like hoping for somebody to nail it, and you were the one that did. And so
that's great. I'm glad.
Yeah, me too. It was really cool to hear our vision for this come to life through your voice.
Good.
So as the narrator, you became a member of our team. And it was its own project to do, there's all the writing and there's the putting out the paperback and the ebook, but then the audiobook is its own animal. And so when you became a part of the team, I mean, you have your own process. It was my first time. Jerry's done other audiobooks, but it was my first time with an audiobook and working with a pro narrator. So what to you made the collaboration work and or not work? And what advice would you have for giving people managing, especially the creative projects, with lots of stakeholders?
Well, so your book was my first real world, touching a project management. To me, and even still, even after doing the book, project management is one of those real esoteric. What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a project manager. What is that? Does anybody really know? To me, it's like, I'm a consultant. Really? You get paid? It's just one of those weird ethereal things that, like, is that a real thing? So this was my first foray into what's that?
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Right. And you got letters after your name, But so one of the things, we communicated a lot via text message after we started the project rolling. And I asked you a question, Dawn. I don't remember what it was, but you responded in project management speak saying, well, it was something about scheduling or timing or whatever. So what I found, no, I'm not saying project speak, but you likened our collaboration to a good project manager. I don't even know the term, a good project. In the fact that we were communicating quickly and readily and efficiently in order to keep the thing going. Because what I do when I get a new author is, you can communicate via email, but I prefer to communicate via text because most people are likely to let an email sit in their email folder until the end of the day. I'm in my studio right now. I have a question. How do you pronounce this word? What do you want me to do with this sentence? So if I have to email you and wait for an answer, I can't narrate. I'm sitting doing nothing. But being able to text with you and get an answer from you or Jerry pretty quickly about this problem or that problem makes everything makes the wheels turn more smoothly.
Yeah.
So
it occurred to me it's not unlike the chapter in our book from Top Gun around the fighter pilots. They don't have time to send a letter.
Right. I have to make a decision now. And granted, I hate to tell you, narrating your book is not a life or death situation. No one's going to die, but still, you get the gist.
Yeah. Well, you were juggling a lot of travel. You have other things you do. I mean, so and what I appreciated was that you really helped tell us what you need. And a lot of team members, they're just more passive, and you were very active at telling us what you need, when you need it, where you were. You were awesome with communication, which is, the glue that keeps it all together, and also the WD-40 that keeps things going smoothly. So I really appreciated that part. So finding the right communication tool to get what you need when you need it, and working with creatives, respecting their expertise and stuff. It sounds like that's part
communication of is, well, like with probably most things, but with narrating an audiobook, communication is hugely important, because also everybody has to manage expectations. This was your book. You had it sounding a certain way in your head. You gave it to me. I have to make assumptions based on what I think you want compared with what I can provide, things like that. So there's a little bit of give and take, you might want something that I can't deliver, but I can deliver maybe the next best thing, or you aren't aware of something that I can do in audiobook narrate. Oh, well, we didn't know we could do that, perhaps. So it's, again, it's back and forth. There's communication is probably just the number one thing.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the sample that you did, and you said, "Hey, my process is I'm going to give you a sample, and you're going to give me feedback, and then from there, I'm going to roll."
Right.
I was
Right.
like, "Great,
Because
cool."
probably very, very much like project management, you can't micromanage. Micromanaging is bad.
And we don't want to.
Right. Here's your task. Do it.
Yeah.
Within the parameters we've set up,
Right.
show us a result.
Yeah, it worked. I thought it worked out great.
It did.
So this is, now you've narrated fiction, nonfiction, thrillers,
Mhm.
and now a project management book. But in your work, have you learned, what have you learned about keeping an audience engaged, especially when the material is complex or information heavy? Because a lot of us, the project managers,
Sure.
and PMO leaders, have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering what your tip might be there.
So this is a real lesson I have learned since I started. I'm going to become an audiobook narrator. Okay, so whenever it is you get your first book or you're auditioning from the beginning, stuff like that, you come in, you get in your booth, you sit in your chair, you adjust your microphone, and you put the script on the screen, and then you narrate. I am Sir Laurence Olivier. I am narrating this book. You will listen to it, gosh darn it, because I am the narrator, and all this other kind of stuff. And if you get coaching, if you get good coaching, you're going to get coaches that go, stop doing that. Stop. Stop it. So the key to good narration, whether it's thriller, whether it's science fiction, whether it's nonfiction, is I have to make it engaging to the audience. I cannot let you fall asleep, especially if you're driving on the freeway. I'm listening to this book and it's boring. A narrator can't do that. What a lot of narrators don't realize in the beginning, talk. Tell me the story. Give me the information. Pretend you're sitting across the table from me and tell me the information. Don't read the script as a robot, which is very boring. Don't do it as a narrator, especially for nonfiction, because how do you inflect in nonfiction? There was a part in, I can't remember which chapter, but I believe it was the Moneyball chapter where the author was describing playing baseball as a child, and his father was. I really liked that part. Because this is a nonfiction book, but within this chapter, here's a story that has to be told as a story, not as data.
Right.
It's not data that they went to the game and they imagined their father there and they scored the right winning run. Tell the story. Let it pull a little bit here. Get that across. So, but then when that part's done and you're back into the data, you still have to make it interesting. So you have to change your inflection. You have to, again, talk to me. Pretend we're sitting at a conference,
Right.
So that's the biggest thing about keeping your audience engaged is you have to. Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate that so much.
Right?
I appreciate that.
Good?
I appreciate that.
Kurt was the one going on the road. Like, yeah, thank you, Kurt.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But that's exactly it. You have to keep them engaged. And the number one way to do that is I belong to several online groups. And when we're talking and when we're teaching and mentoring, tell the story. Tell me a story. Don't read the words.
Storytelling is such a skill, and it's only learned through practice, I think.
1000%. Very few people are born with this. I mean, I'm sure there are, but it's 1000% practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So keep practicing, y'all. That's the key. And so finally, last question for today. Without giving too much away, was there a movie chapter or character in Project Glenn Goes to the Movies that was especially fun to narrate?
No, there wasn't one because like I said, I'd seen almost all of these movies. So I enjoyed all of them. What I found interesting was that this book is very much how life imitates art. You're taking, I've seen Top Gun 1,000 times. I've seen Ghostbusters. Moneyball is one of my favorite movies. I've seen these movies. Never once did I take a work lesson away from any of these. I watched it and went, what, Tom Cruise? Because I was inverted. That's what I got out of it.
Right.
Not making these split-second decisions. So no, that's what I enjoyed about it. I didn't enjoy one chapter. I liked going, wow, wow, I see how that makes sense. I get that. Wow, who knew? You guys did. All your authors did. I didn't. I didn't know, but that's what I enjoyed was like I said, the life imitating art part about, okay, these are real lessons. And for, I don't want to say a layman, but for a lay person in project management, in my opinion, this book was a great way to get them to put two and two together. Oh, okay, light bulbs are going off over my head.
Yeah, absolutely. That was part of the purpose. And Jerry and I were even surprised by some of the lessons they pulled out of some of our favorite movies that we didn't even see.
Yeah,
Right.
when I heard some of the movies coming up, I was thinking, well, wow, what kind of lesson is going to be in that?
Exactly that. Exactly that. There's a lesson in this. What?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, School of Rock didn't see it coming,
No,
but
absolutely not.
she nailed it. Rachel,
Yeah.
That was
absolutely.
great.
Well, Eric, thank you for taking the time out of
You're
your
very welcome.
studio
Thank you for having
to
me.
join us here in Project Land and for sharing your voice and being the voice that does the voices in Project Land. Just wonderful. Everybody, please thank Eric Priestman for being here today and check him out on ericpriestman.com. Bye for now, Eric.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you. Jerry, that was so fun.
It was, yeah, definitely. Now we have to follow up with resource management.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. So
But we'll make it fun.
Our main thing today, everybody, I hope you enjoyed meeting Eric. I sure loved having
He's
him
a great guy.
share absolutely, the tips with us, because I think we can all take a lot from how to deliver speeches and how to share data and in a fun, engaging way that Eric just shared with us. So we'll see what we can do today, Jerry, on that. But you probably need no introduction here, but I'm going to do it anyway, because you've done a whole lot in your career. And I want to make sure people understand the perspective that they're going to get today from you. So Jerry Manas is the author of the Resource Management and Capacity Planning Handbook, a guide to maximizing the value of your limited people resources. Dave Garrett, former president and CEO of projectmanagement.com, described the book as an approach to maximizing the people power in your organization that's easy to understand and apply. And Judith E. Glazer, author of Conversational Intelligence, called it the first book dedicated to what is essentially the drivetrain of organizations, the effective use of its people toward its most important activities. So with that, I'd like to share that Jerry and I are going to go through some fun stuff today, and we have a lot to cover, so we'll do it as quickly as we can. But Jerry, take it away.
Thanks, Dawn. And it's funny, it says limited people resources. When the publisher came up with the title, which honestly I thought was kind of dry, but that's besides the point. But they for SEO. But it originally said limited resources, and then I suggested inserting the word people because resource means so many different things.
Yes.
And that's part of the issue with resource management. A lot of people don't know what it is. And then I found out that limited people resources in France, limited kind of meant stupid, but it's too late for that.
Oh, whoops.
At any rate, so yeah, this is the book, and today we're going to take a quick look at the current industry or the current state of things in resource management, see where it fits in the great scheme of things in the organization, what classic PMOs are missing. We're going to take a look at some symptoms and solutions, so this will be sort of interactive. And then what can PMO leaders and project managers do about it? And since a lot of times you're on the receiving end of that.
And so folks, go ahead and ask your questions, make your comments in the chat. We can see them and I'll bring them up on stage as appropriate. So please do feel free to light up the chat with questions, comments, and your own experiences. And yep, we'll be queuing up some fun symptoms polls too. So go ahead, Jerry.
That'll be fun. So 10 years ago, it's hard to believe it was 10 years ago. It seems like yesterday I was using this slide as today. Well, at any rate, I was involved in a few benchmark studies back 10 years ago. And well, in 2014 and 2016, we surveyed some 650 PMO leaders and executives on what their key pain points are around this area. And the number one thing that came in was resource overcommitment. This was a tag cloud from the actual survey results. And you can see, lack of visibility. A lot of this will look familiar. Data in silos, reactive, project delays, and so on. So, this was a state of resource management. Now, 10 years later, resource allocation is still key. McKinsey said 83% of executives call it the top lever for growth. And PMI's Pulse of the Profession highlights that inadequate resource allocation is a primary driver of project failure. and that properly balancing capacity and demand is critical for navigating complex systems. So 10 years later, we still haven't necessarily got it resolved. So the question is, why are we still struggling with this? I always love the baby at the chessboard. What does this mean for PMO leaders and project managers specifically? Because a lot of this stuff, to some degree, is out of your hands. Now, I always love this quote from Albert Einstein. He said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. And so we're going to try to make this as simple as possible, but it's not necessarily a simple thing. So if we look at the process from a high level, we see there's an intake process with any organization. There's a new request comes in, you classify and scope and size it. Is it bigger than a bread box and so on? And we say, is it a project? So there's some usually thresholds, usually a threshold that says, is this a project? And if it is, then it comes over, you submit it for approval, and it comes over to the portfolio planning and staffing side of things. So you receive the project into the portfolio and you assess it against the rest of the portfolio and say, okay, where does this stand priority-wise? Do we rank it? And often you'll look at the budget and say, okay, let's assign budget to this project. And you look at spend. What a lot of people don't do is you should be also looking at capacity. And this is where capacity comes in that says, is this feasible? Can we deliver this? And does something else have to get moved in order to fit this in? Or do we schedule this later? So then you accept or reject or hold the project. And this waiting period is what a lot of people forget. They think, okay, the project's approved, let's start. And they go right into execution and say, let's start delivering the project. And really, there needs to be this waiting period to say, when can we fit it in? When can we slot this in when we have the resources available? Because if you just pile everything in, then everything takes longer.
Yeah, so many organizations miss that step.
Exactly. And then you get the iterative or predictive projects coming in, the innovation projects that say, okay, we're going to, and it's not even planned, and they'll come out of nowhere and then upset the apple cart again. And often they don't even go through this process. So then, unless there's a dedicated team, which can be, so then you have the project execution lifestyle, whether it's agile or waterfall or whatever. But there's, with the pure agile, it's a dedicated team. But in my experience, I don't know about you, Dawn, but most of what I've seen, people are practicing hybrid agile. It's really wagile.
Yeah, creative agile, or as one client called it, water scrum fall.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're not co-located. They're not necessarily close to the customer. And then, now these days, a lot of people are remote, so it's a whole new animal.
Yeah, and then they blame agile and they're actually doing it wrong. But that's a different conversation.
Exactly. Okay. So if if you have a mix of people doing agile, waterfall, or whatever, you're typically borrowing resources. So that's where the resource allocation comes in as you get closer into the project execution. So over here, you're planning the project against a portfolio, usually at a high level, like a skill level, and then here you're actually allocating people. So that's at a very high level. Now, Hans Hofmann, the artist, said the ability to simplify means to eliminate the unnecessary so that the necessary may speak. And so we're going to try to do is cut out everything unnecessary. Let's cut out all the noise and then take a look at a 10,000-foot view. Now, since I'm displaying from a PDF, you don't have all the fancy animations, but you get the idea. Usually the world spins. But so we look at our flat Earth here, and we see that we have project management and the gear. These are what people typically think, okay, this makes the gears turn in an organization because this is where the plans happen, the execution, the leadership, and where all that happens. But then to grease these gears, what do you need? You need people, or nothing's going to happen. And that's where the people and the skills and productivity, which a lot of people forget about, is, people aren't robots, or, people are more productive in certain environments. So, we grease these wheels, and then we have resource management. And then portfolio management is looking at the strategies and the budgets and targets and priorities. They're the ones that decide which projects we're doing, when, and things like that. And while the project management delivers, we also have benefits realization, which a lot of people kind of lop off, which talks about the goals and the metrics and the results that they're going to bring, and then measures those results. So if we put this another way, portfolio management is doing the right work. And then the resource management is doing the right work with the right people at the right time. Project management's doing the work right. And then benefits realization is measuring and maximizing the results. And so you get them all together and they produce value. And that's where value comes from. And traditional PMOs a lot of times only look at half the world, or looking at project management. And if you're lucky, they're also looking at portfolio management. That doesn't mean they execute the prioritization, but they own the processes for it, and they foster it. And then a lot of times they're not looking much at the resource management side of things, or certainly not the benefits realization. So what I think is we need to move from a classic PMO, and a lot of PMOs are starting to do this now. It's starting to move in this direction to something more and more at a strategic level. And of course, today we're going to be focused on the resource management side of things, aligning the right people with the right work. But also we have the benefits realization, the project management, portfolio management. And so a lot of people are starting to think about the name of the PMO. And you think, okay, well, what's in a name? I've seen things from a results management office, even a resource management office in a professional services firm where resource management is a central thing. Strategic integration office, alignment and delivery. I've seen them all, but the main thing is what the function is. Have you seen a lot of different?
Yeah, I've seen that PMO is a bad acronym in some places, and so they had a bad experience with a PMO because the PMO was too heavy-handed, or didn't deliver what was expected. Just was the process police or whatever. And so sometimes a name change is important for making the rest of the organization want to work with you. And so we've seen and work with the strategy delivery office, like all these different things. But so sometimes the name does matter. And I appreciate that you're bringing up the context here of where does resource management fit, because all of these gears need to work together well to have the organization really get the return on investment that they're looking for, not only from the projects, but also from the PMO office, or whatever you want to call it.
Right. Yeah. And because in a lot of organizations, PMO has this stigma of being the process police, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And so
and we don't want that. That's not
right.
Anybody, we don't want to be the process police, I don't think. At least the people that I work with aren't. They're not interested in that either. Let's deliver some value and make life easier.
Right. Yeah. Luckily, I'm seeing more and more PMOs move in that direction. At least the ones that want the proverbial seat at the table. So let's start with our first look at symptoms. You might have seen this, the iceberg of ignorance, and that's where 4% of problems, only 4% of problems are known to the top managers, and middle managers maybe only 9%. So 96% of problems are usually hidden from top management, yet they're the ones making the decisions about what projects to work on and things like that. So these are some symptoms we see a lot. No clear view of who's working on what.
So Jerry, sorry to interrupt. I have a little poll. I'm trying it for the first time on StreamYard here. So if you folks that are listening could get your fingers ready and participate, that would be really cool. So we're going to talk through what the symptoms are. This is the fun symptoms quiz we promised. These are not the only symptoms. They will be shared throughout, but we're going to talk about what they mean, because we were limited on the number of characters we could use in the poll. But I'm going to start it now, and so let's see if that works for folks. So let's see. All right, looks like looks like I can see it in the corner, and now I can't see you. So
okay, well, it's okay. They don't need to see me.
All right, well, I'll move stuff around. So like
the neighbor on Home Improvement.
Right, like let me remove myself and see. So go ahead and I'll move stuff around, but keep talking through what they are.
That's right. Yeah. So we have so no clear view of who's working on what. Uncertainty about staffing for strategic initiatives. You have major initiatives coming up, and do we really have the staff to achieve it or not? And then funding and headcount decisions. Often they feel like guesses, not necessarily based on data, and so we see that happen a lot. And so do we have any poll results or coming in? But anyway, these are things that we happen to see a lot.
Yeah, so I was able to move the poll to the corners. It's kind of interesting. Okay. There was no way to test this, by the way, because it has to be live to be able to roll it.
Right.
But I definitely love the iceberg of ignorance situation, because I think that is so, so very true. And it looks like live, we're getting 100% so far for the folks who have participated. Trouble staffing strategic work.
Yeah,
So
because more and more people are getting basic visibility, so they're at least start to have a clear view of what people are working on. I think people are starting to get the idea, but
yeah,
but the data-driven decisions are where a lot of what I'm seeing is the data-driven decisions are what's falling short in many cases.
Yeah, yeah. So we have a winner there.
Yeah. So the root cause of this is a lack of visibility. And so that's the first quadrant in a model I call the capacity quadrant. And the capacity
this is in the book, right?
Yeah. That's in the book. And there's a whole chapter on it. It kind of, culminates, everything in the book culminates in that model. And it's a framework. It can work with any software. It's not something that's glued to anything, any kind of software. But it's a way to think about this and put a lasso around what we need to do around resource management. So visibility, it's really broadening your view, looking at both the capacity and the demand lens, having a shared view of capacity. And also what I call the system lens is the root causes that can interfere with capacity and demand. So let's just take a quick look. I use this bucket analogy. Often I say, what's in your bucket? So let's say we have a bucket representing capacity, and you can see it's overflowing like most organizations, and demand is the water coming from the faucet. And so there's two things you can do. You can get a bigger bucket, or you can reduce the water coming out of the demand. So it's like, raise a bridge or lower the river kind of thing. And so we have that. But then there's a missing picture here of what's in the bucket. You think it's an empty bucket. You think you have the whole bucket full to hold water. But usually you don't, because if we look through the bucket, if we open this up, we can see there's a bunch of stones in the bucket. And a lot of people don't have that visibility. In a typical organization, yours may vary. Your day job, the daily operations of people that you're using for your projects, unless they're fully dedicated, they could spend 35, 45% on their daily operations, depending on what their jobs are. And they might spend another, and these come out of different, many different surveys. So these are averages that are taken. Firefighting and support, people might spend 15 to 25% on that. And other planned work, things that are too small to be projects, but things that are either pet requests or work projects or service requests or whatever you want to call them, they're planned, or rather, they're planned, but they're not project sized. And then there's just administration and noise, just things that take up time. Come to a town meeting, we're talking about our new policy and stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the project. And yes, I see somebody said task switching is the biggest issue. I actually had this on the thing. I should have kept it, actually, because task switching takes up a huge amount of time. Don't remember that?
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, task switching. I kind of lumped it into noise, but it really should be called out. And that takes up a huge amount of time, switching tasks to go to different things. And so that really leaves very little availability for projects. Now, this we're saying here 10 to 20%. On a good day, it might be 30%, maybe even 40. Rarely does somebody have 100 or even 80% available to work on projects unless they're dedicated to that project. And I didn't even include time off, like vacations or sick days or anything like that. Training, right? Yeah, exactly. Training, all kinds of stuff. So you can see that when you're filling your bucket with water, that you're not dealing with a full bucket. But a lot of people plan capacity in this way, as if they have people, and if people are working on XYZ projects, then the rest is available. And that's not the case, because they don't have visibility of all the other stuff they're doing. So that's where it has to be considered, and getting more visibility around that. So the big question here is, how do you manage this problem without getting more buckets, reducing the stones greatly, or slowing the water down to a trickle? And that's what resource management is all about. And those are the kind of things we're going to be talking about. Another batch of symptoms. Which of these symptoms sound familiar? Constantly shifting priorities. Look, squirrel. Growth initiatives keep slipping because urgent noise always wins. And we have another poll here for this. So constantly shifting priorities, growth initiatives keep slipping. When I say growth initiatives, projects that are meant to help grow the business or build revenue. But anyway, things that are important to the business keep slipping because things that are urgent keeps slipping in ahead of it. Endless fire drills and emergencies is like playing whack-a-mole. I always like this statement here from Confucius: "Person who chases two rabbits catches neither." And I
Yeah,
think
it's a good one.
that happens a lot here. So thinking about this, do some of these resonate more than others? Where priorities keep shifting, or the important stuff keeps getting bumped out by urgent fire drills and emergencies.
Yeah, so go ahead in the chat and just put one number at a time so that the poll can pick it up. It looks like we had a few folks in the last one. I didn't know how it worked either. This was an experiment today. Had some multi-answers in the comments, and then the poll wasn't able to pick it up.
Oh, is
So
that how it works? Okay.
yeah, so we had in the last one, we had 3 and 2 and then 1 as one answer. So that kind of covers it. We had 2 and 1 mostly. So all of the symptoms were covered in the last one. We just couldn't see it. We didn't have visibility, Jerry, into
Right.
the
We didn't have visibility. This is a great metaphor for trying to manage projects in a portfolio.
Yeah,
You're making
absolutely.
decisions without visibility. Fire drills we see. Okay. And yeah, you can just throw them in a chat too, and that's fine. But yeah, so this basically happens a lot. But at the bottom right of the slide, I ask, how does this impact you as a PMO leader or project manager? Because a lot of these, again, like I said, the decisions are happening at the tip of that iceberg where there's very little visibility. So the higher you go up making the decisions, the less visibility people have. And they're making all these decisions. And as a PMO leader or project manager, your projects are suffering because these decisions are being made in a vacuum with little visibility.
Absolutely. Cool. The answers are coming in. We can see you.
Great.
Thank you for that.
So now we can start to see some answers. So
Yeah.
to varying degrees, a lot of this stuff happens, and the root cause of this is prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go to our next quadrant, prioritization, it's really understanding what's important in an organization, and so there's strategic alignment, scoring, categorization. I'll go right to the next slide here. I call this 3 lenses, 1 priority view. So if you look at strategic alignment, usually there's some hierarchy of missions, measurable objectives to achieve the missions, and then strategies that gets into the how from a high level, and then programs, which gets into the what and say, okay, or the how at a detailed level to say, okay, how are we going to deliver these strategies? So to what degree a project aligns with your strategies? Now, a lot of organizations don't even have their strategies articulated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see that a lot too. It's like they're not even, so it's good even in an agile organization. I don't mean agile, I mean little agile, business agile organization. I've heard one organization say, we have a strategy. It's called doing things. And so that's, which is okay, but it's still good to at least capture that and say, here's what we're trying now. Here's what's important. So, and how does your project align with that? And then we have project scoring. Many of you have probably seen this, where you have different levels of scores. You have benefits and risk scores, and usually it's a weighted composite score. You might look at IRR with the actual financials, strategic value, relative, the relative cost and effort compared to other projects, and you might develop a weighted score and use that to compare your projects. So far we have how well they align with strategy, how well the project scores. And then there's the categorization, which is and there's many different ways of doing this. You don't need to do them all, but to some degree, most organizations capture data like this, which is, for instance, which business unit. Maybe some business units are more urgent than others, maybe not. Maybe they're weighted. Maybe project types, growth, efficiency, compliance, innovation. Maybe that can help you make a decision. So think of all this as input. The impact type, whether it impacts the financials, the customer, operations, or is regulatory, they usually have to come first, or other things, based on regions and risks and so on. But at any rate, there's different ways to categorize a project. So if we look at the strategic alignment, project scoring, and the categorization, all of that serves as input that you can then usually, it's hard to do with an algorithm, but usually you have to use all this as input and make some kind of a manual decision to say what priority band does it belong in. And I usually use, like, I see this a lot, like 1,000 is the highest priority, and 2,000 is next, and the 3,000 is lower priorities, 4,000s, and so on. And the reason we do that is because within that priority, if you have, let's say you have 100 projects that are 1,000, highest priority, you can start to then have like 1,010 or, and so on, to kind of rank them to a degree. What I usually suggest is ranking projects that are competing for the same resources, doing selective or isolated, targeted ranking. To try to rank every project sequentially is, to me, a futile effort.
It is. Yeah. I've come into other organizations that have tried to do that, and it just, bands are much more useful. And then you can do surgical work around those.
Exactly.
I think you're going to talk about too.
I equate that to putting a giant project schedule up on a wall. It's usually useless by the time you put the last tack on. But, so it's usually futile. But so at least start with priority bands and use this stuff as input, and you can start to get a better understanding. So if we move on, which is the next batch of symptoms, which of these symptoms sound familiar? Skills don't. This guy looks frustrated. He happens to also look exactly like my wife's cousin, to the point where I actually asked him if he posed for a photo, and he said no. But that's besides the point.
He does look very frustrated, and like a whole lot of poor IT guys.
You can tell he's a people person.
Yes.
So skills don't match the project. We have skills in house, but they don't necessarily match the project needs. 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work, and they're exhausted. Where everything seems to tend to lean towards the same group of people. And there's no clear strategy for when to bring in outside help. It seems to be potluck or whatever. So if any of these sound familiar, you can chime in with the poll or in the comments. But I see this a lot, where it's like the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the work is constrained by 20% of the people. And they tend to be burnt out because they're needed on almost every project.
Yeah, this is where you select the A team. But everybody wants the A team. Right. Not that anybody is a B team or C team, but these are the favorite people that are well known for getting things done very well, high quality, etc. But what about everybody else? Right. In the organization? And what is this doing to the 20% of people that tend to be selected? This is like, back in the day. I mean, I have my flag football shirt on today, but I was never picked when I was a kid for the kickball team. Like I wasn't picked because I wasn't a natural athlete then. I had to grow into one later on. And so I feel like the organizations who have this situation, I feel so bad for everybody, because there are people waiting in the wings that go, I would help. I would like to help. I'd be delighted to help.
And sometimes you have a superstar sitting on the bench.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, diamond in the rough out there. Yeah. And so this is really something to look at too. And we see some results coming in. We have a clear winner on this page. Skills don't match project needs. Yeah. So that's really curious.
Yeah. You see that a lot. Projects come up, they have needs, and that's where where strategy can come in. And a root cause for this is what I call lack of optimization. And optimization is really focusing on efficiency and value, having a staffing strategy, looking at trying to get optimize the resources that you do have by doing better portfolio planning and making decisions around the important work in the portfolio. And then also productivity and engagement, which is also a huge part of this, because again, we're dealing with human beings, not suitcases, and so on. Now, if we look at this quadrant so far, we can see to do all this, you first need visibility and prioritization. If you don't have a view of your demand and supply, and if you don't really understand which work is most important, it's impossible to make decisions. And so you need that as a foundation. And so then you can start optimizing and making decisions. So on the portfolio level, there's only really three. It's not complicated. There's only three doors, like let's make a deal to resolve capacity issues. If you have it, you can either delay, stagger, shift, like push out certain projects until the resources become available, if you can. And that's why it's important to know what your project priorities are. Which ones can you afford to push out, or even split up into segments. and say, okay, well, you got the car door today and you got the rest of the car tomorrow. But, or you can reduce demand. Like in Jaws, we said, we're going to need a bigger boat. Well, maybe you can get a smaller shark. So reduce demand, cancel or reduce the scope of certain projects. So there's certain projects you can, deliver parts of it, or, even cancel certain projects if they're not as critical as some other ones. Or the thing a lot of people forget about is get help, change sourcing strategies, or bring in external people, or develop internal talent. Use people you do have that maybe aren't as busy but have certain skills. And that's where it becomes helpful to have data on people's skills and proficiencies, not just their job titles, because a lot of people have skills outside of their job title. And then the bonus tip I have here, in the interest of time, usually I have a whole slide on it, but really optimize the environment, because the environment you have, if it's a healthy environment where people can thrive, they're not doing excessive multitasking, they're aligned with their strengths, all of those things, it greatly improve your capacity without adding people.
And that's the task switching that a guest brought in earlier.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
So limit task switching for people, limit the fire drills as much as you can. As project managers, we can protect our team from people coming straight at them as well, right? So there are things we can do to optimize the environment, and PMO leaders have a great deal of responsibility in that area, in my opinion.
That's absolutely right. And then if we look at the next batch of symptoms, which of these symptoms sound familiar? We have missed deadlines because people are unavailable. Projects get approved and funded before anyone checks whether the people to do the work actually exist. So you get projects launched. We saw that on our diagram. Projects get launched. You don't even know if the people exist to do it or when. Everybody's playing tug of war for the same resources. Every planning cycle, it feels like you're trying to fund everything, but you really are able to fully resource nothing. So trying to basically fund everything. So so if you can put your answers in the polls or in the comments, but around missed deadlines, approvals before there's an availability check.
So the one that sounds a lot like one on the previous page, but maybe a little different, is the playing tug of war for the same resources.
Yeah. So this is actually, the cause of the symptom on the other on the other page. We have 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. And so it's really related to it. Everybody, they need the same people in many cases to get the projects done, and everything is important. So I hear that a lot. Well, it's all important. We have to do all of it. And you can't necessarily do all of it unless you have a staffing strategy where you're bringing people in, for swings in demand or skills that you don't have, or to upskill your own people. I think we had a slide on that actually, but I think we, in the interest of time, we whacked it.
But, the thing that there are lots of strategies for this, but again, as a project manager, well, what happens to you? Well, you're being responsible for getting your project through, and meanwhile you're playing tug of war for resources. Well, who do you play the tug of war with? I highly recommend you find out who the other project manager is, and you go negotiate together. You sit down with your schedules and you say, look, I need Jerry on my project. We can't have them on at the same time. Let's try to make life a little easier for Jerry. I could take him this week if you can take him that week. And then Jerry's grateful that we're not both beating on his door on the same day. So the negotiation skills and really understanding your schedule and who the critical resources are in your organization can be really, really helpful.
Negotiation, I think, is one of the most unsung skills that a project manager can have. And I'm going to give a shout out to our Project Land Goes to the Movies book, because we have a whole chapter on negotiation from a negotiator in the movie Cash Out.
And he happens to be here, John.
Oh, he happens to be here. Okay, great. And that's such an important thing. And that's why I was so happy to see that particular chapter. And it was a great film because it features a negotiation at its center. And so it's such an important lesson for project managers, because everything is negotiating with stakeholders around scope, around, with customers, with vendors.
Well, and PMO leaders too, because a lot of times the PMO leader has to be the courageous force to bring the situation to bear for the executives, to explain to them, bring the picture of the bucket and say, listen, we don't even know what the capacity of our organization is because we don't have visibility. But here's what I suspect, that it's being taken up by all of these different layers. And so there's only this much room. In theory, we don't have the, if you don't have the data, you don't have the data, but they should feel that. They should have a pulse on that enough. And so to the extent that we as PMO leaders can bring the situation to the executive to make decisions on and say, and explain, this is why we need priorities. This is why we need visibility. This is why we need to understand more about the skills in the organization and have a staffing strategy for when we will invest in getting extra help from the outside. For example, if the ROI is high enough, will we go, of course we should go get extra help if the project can pay for it, et cetera.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. Especially if you can build the cost into the project.
Hi, John. So we have that poll, and it looks like we've got the board lit up a bit. And we talked a little bit before about schedules being difficult. So
yeah.
So this root cause is lack of alignment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the root cause really is a lack of alignment here. And this completes the quadrant. So we have visibility and prioritization. So that sets the foundation. You can optimize to say, how do we maximize the use of our existing resources through better staffing strategy, your portfolio planning, making decisions, shifting things around. And the one we didn't talk a whole lot about, but it's just as important, is productivity and engagement. Again, aligning people with their strengths and so on. And then the last piece is the glue that holds it all together, and that's coordinating actions across the organization. That's your reallocation paths and an escalation path, tiered levels of governance, cross-functional planning around, making sure things are integrated with portfolio management, workforce planning, finance, HR. It's all connected.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah. And if we look at a typical organizational planning cycle, again, it may vary in your organization, but usually there's some level of annual planning where you have strategies that leads into an annual operating plan, and you do your long-range planning, and it typically happens at least annually. And then quarterly, there's usually some kind of prioritization and allocation process where you have prioritized resource allocation, and ideally that's at least quarterly, where you're saying, let's allocate it at least at a high level. These are the things we have coming up this quarter, and here's how we're going to allocate it. And then monthly, there should be a portfolio review monthly, where you take portfolio level actions, again saying, okay, here's where things stand. We're slipping on this project because we're having some resource issues. Do we have to move things around? Again, those decisions can be made there. A lot of organizations I see do this bi-weekly, so that's another way to do it. And then you have your project-specific meetings, your weekly stage gate meetings or steering meetings, where you can give project-specific guidance and no-goes, or goes or no-goes. And they can escalate that to the monthly portfolio review, which I often see happen. And projects can escalate things to the steering team, and the steering team can escalate things to the portfolio review, and so on. So all of that serves as input. There's a top-down and bottom-up process. And then there's various internal advisory councils or special interest groups that serve as the voice of the customer. So I see that a lot. You might have a group that represents all of the procurement projects, for instance, or it depends on the part of the organization. But there could be advisory councils for certain functions that can make decisions about, here's what's most important to us, because that's where you get that voice of the customer that can help make some of those decisions. And so it's all a planning cycle, and this kind of helps keep all that together.
And I just want to mention on that side that in IT, sometimes in big IT shops and large corporations, there's a role called something like a business relationship manager, and that a person can help facilitate that voice of the function.
Absolutely.
Business that they're assigned to, and bring it back to the technology shop, for instance. to help with the prioritization, because if there's one technology shop, but there are 10 different business units and functions, then you suddenly, even if each of them could pick one as their highest priority, then suddenly tech has 10 high priority number ones. That doesn't really work very well in real life. So all of these layers are really, really helpful. So if your organization doesn't have one, a scheme like this, like a planning cycles like this is something to think about.
Absolutely. And that's a good point about the business relationship person, or it could be a business analyst. I had one client, they had, for every project, they had a business project manager and a technical project manager.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I always think back of the old Napoleon quote, it's better to have one bad general than two good ones. But as long as it's clear, if somebody is is fully accountable,
right.
And in many cases, it's depending on the project, it could be either the business person or the technical person.
Yeah. Usually it's the business person.
Usually it's the business person,
yeah.
Unless it's a pure technical project. But usually it's the business person that's accountable, and they can make some of those decisions.
Yeah,
and definitely. It worked pretty well.
Yep.
Okay, here comes back the baby and the chessboard. So this is all great, but where do we start? Who does what? And so you may be thinking, okay, this is interesting from an organizational level, but we're stuck in the middle trying to manage projects or manage a portfolio. So the first question often comes up is who should own the resource management process? And I created my own superhero here, Resource Man. So who should own the process? But to know who should own the process, let's look at what is the process? What do you have to do? There's define the process and the maturity path. So we talk about the capacity quadrant can be a useful tool for organizing that and putting it together. So what is your resource management process? At what point do you request resources, then allocate them, and so on? And what's your maturity path? Where do you? I have a whole maturity model. I'm happy to share with people at some point. But what's your maturity path with resource management? It has to start with visibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Facilitating the data building, like what kind of data do you want to keep with resources? Do you want to keep track of skills, proficiencies, cost centers? Those are the kind of things. Monitoring adoption to make sure people are actually keeping the data up to date. Gaining management buy-in is key, because if management's not bought in, it's going to be an uphill battle trying to get everybody on board. And you'll see on the next slide where we talk about the roles, it's important that everybody participates. Because you're dealing with project managers, resource managers, and so on. Optionally reporting on capacity and demand. Here's where we stand in terms of our capacity and demand, and so it can raise red flags to different parts of the organization. And then recommending sourcing strategies.
Well, what's awesome is when you can do that into the future.
Well, absolutely.
So you can see that these skills are going to be in demand, in quarter whatever in the future. Yeah. So let's make sure we make decisions ahead of time, so it's not such a fire drill when we get there.
Absolutely.
And it's like an emergency. So it's a beautiful thing when you can look into the future like that.
Yeah. And that's where alignment comes in, because you need to also communicate with finance and HR to talk about maybe staffing. And here's what we have coming down the pike. We're going to have some needs in this area.
Yeah.
And or talent development. That becomes key. So it's all connected. And then the sourcing strategies, that's where, that's another part of the process, is recommend when do we bring in outside help, for seasonal efforts, for areas where we don't have the skills in-house, and so on.
Right.
And so these are, basically often, now if a purist says, okay, well, who should own this? Well, you might say, okay, well, it's an operational thing, so it really should be the COO, or it should be a COO process. But it's it's like the old ham and eggs dinner. The chicken's involved and the pig's totally committed. The PMO is stuck in the middle of it, and so in many cases it falls on the PMO to own the process. That doesn't mean they're the ones performing the work, but at least owning the process. Often it falls to the PMO, even though it's an operational thing.
Yeah, well, it's part of PMO operations then. So let's look at the PMO and PM points of view. Yeah.
So if we look at the who owns what data, typically, and again, I put PMO and portfolio manager, because the PMO a lot of times will own the process, but the portfolio manager in the business would own the mapping to strategy, the prioritization of projects, and even the project data. What data gets associated with the project? What attributes? The financial manager obviously owns the financial forecast and the financial data. The project manager has the project schedule and, of course, reports on the project status and issues, any task level assignments. And I have an arrow here, double arrow here, because the project manager needs to be working closely with the resource manager. And here's why. I often say the resource manager should own the effort forecast because they're the only ones with full visibility of everything the resource is working on, including what's coming down the pike. Even the resource themselves may not know what's coming down the pike. They know what they're doing now. But the project manager only cares about their project. They don't care what else the resource is on, and they don't necessarily have visibility of that. So this really needs to be a joint thing, and really you could also add the resource themselves. So it should be really a joint discussion around the effort forecast, what else is coming down the pike, who can do this and that, and so on. And so really, people say, what's the best resource management tool? I often say it's a telephone. because,
That makes sense. Yeah.
or in person, whatever. But they need to communicate around forecasting resources. And the resource manager owns the resource data and keeping track of the capacity data when the person's on vacation and things like that.
Yeah, the full picture of the resources
the full
data.
Picture.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I hear a lot is the resource manager, and by resource manager, I mean the functional manager, department head, whoever the resource reports to. And it's so critical. Yeah, I love that double arrow. Me too. It's important because a lot of times I hear the resource managers say, "Well, we're busy. We don't have time to get involved in this." And if they got involved in it, they wouldn't have as much problems, with staffing and things like that. So it's really it takes people working together to make this happen. So how can you help specifically for PMO leaders and project managers? And if we look across the capacity quadrant around visibility, PMO leaders can educate leadership on the value of resource management. Maybe talk to them about the capacity quadrant or something, but about the importance of the value of resource management in general and what the symptoms are. Project managers can keep schedules current. I always suggest asking for contributor estimates for people of, okay, what's left? How much is this going to take? Now, if you're on an agile cycle, then that, kind of goes along with that, but it's just keeping the data current. For prioritization, PMO leaders should ensure capacity is considered before commitments are made. Now, again, the PMO isn't necessarily the one making the commitments, but they should build it into the process to make sure capacity is looked at. And again, project managers understand the value of your project in context. So if you're defending your project against other resources or other competing projects, it's good to understand the business value of your project. I know, Dawn, you've seen that a lot, where projects are, competing against other projects, and the project manager really doesn't. They understand the tasks of what they have to do, but not necessarily the business value or the connection.
Yeah, I'm glad that more organizations are focusing on that more for their PMs now than ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to speak the language of the business in value terms.
Yeah. And then optimization, the PMO leaders ideally should remove any cultural or operational barriers with senior management if they see things aren't working, where resources can't work to their optimal effect, or decision mechanisms aren't in place for shifting portfolios around or projects. Often I see there's very little process or will or anything about canceling any projects. There's a fear of canceling anything, or so often you see, the old proverbial throwing good money after bad kind of thing. So these are cultural things that need to be addressed. Project managers, here's where we talk about negotiation again, negotiating conflicting resource needs. And that's a key thing. For alignment, PMO leaders can ensure ownership of the resource management process and alignment across functions. Try to bring in finance and HR. Often you see HR very, very rarely involved or even thought of in this context, other than providing data for resources, but very little in terms of staffing, and that should change. Project managers, the biggest thing I see is around project managers and resource management is that double arrow, is communicate with resource managers, and that's key. So that's, hopefully this was helpful around the capacity quadrant. And I also have, and Dawn, if you have a list of people who attended, we can send them. I have a one-page checklist to put the capacity quadrant framework in action, and hopefully that'll help. On my website at jerrymanas.com, there's strategic-advisory is a page where I have a free ROI guide if you're trying to put the value together of the ROI of resource management, and a case study showing how an $80 billion global energy company used the capacity quadrant to go from low to high maturity in 18 months. And it was really a good effort they did, and it worked out well.
Yeah, it's quite a story. And if you are interested in those symptoms, Jerry has them on his website as well, so that you can have a conversation in your organization about those symptoms. That can be, I've facilitated, using Jerry's symptoms, conversations in organizations, and it's been very, very helpful because it's all plain language that anybody can understand, and they feel it, right? They feel the tug of war, they feel the fire drills, et cetera. So feel free to go to jerrymanas.com for his specific resources on that. And get on our list so that we can invite you to more events like this and let you know when the recording will be available. I saw somebody was having some trouble with their audio. And so, yes, the recording will be available. We put it on our channel, our PMOtraining channel on YouTube. And also it'll be available here on LinkedIn as well. And so if you get on our list, pmotraining.com/contact-us, you won't miss a thing. And definitely follow us on LinkedIn too. We put out tips all the time. Jerry, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom about, and I know they're like, talk about the iceberg. This was just the tip of the iceberg today. You wrote the book on it that McGraw-Hill released. It's been used in universities. It's been used in corporations. So if people are very interested in improving their resource management situation in their organization, what would you recommend they do if they need a consult with you to see if you could be helpful to them?
Yeah, well, they could contact me. You can go to jerrymanas.com. My contact information's there. I have a strategic advisory page. I also, totally unrelated to this, but I also do book coaching, which is also just a fun thing for me. But
because books, we love
right,
them.
Right, exactly, right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, on my website, the strategic advisory page, I have a lot of free resources too on a resources page. White papers and so on that might be useful.
Great. So contact Jerry if you need any help on the resource management side, because he is the expert. And if you're in the Philadelphia area, it makes it a lot easier for him to get to you. But now that we live in a virtual world, Jerry, you can be anywhere helping to advise people. So
yeah, I do a lot of virtual retainer work and just helping people make some of these decisions and foster projects through this process.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your kind comments here. Yes, lovely presentation, brilliant presentation. Absolutely, it is.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. I hope everybody's having a great rest of their July. And we will we'll do the movie sign off. Bye for now. Thanks for joining.
See ya.